Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the 28th installment of Unfinished Business. We implore you to sit down, grab a cold one, maybe a nice sandwich in your hand, and enjoy. Open your ears as we open our mouths to the second installment of Fantasy
Nice.
Fridays with my co-host, the ever so illustrious Montreal Canadiens fan, Steelers allure, Malcolm Govius. Sir,
Yes,
how are we?
sir. Yes, sir. How's it going? I'm ready for the AFC South
Before
today.
we get into football, I just want to touch upon how great the Maple Leafs kicked your Canadians' ass
In an
this
exhibition
Wednesday.
where we're kicking off the rust, I don't really give a damn. You can keep saying it. I'm expecting it from your Leafs people because it's the only win you got. The last time you guys were in the Cup final, Jim Carrey wasn't even born, so not a big deal. Will Ferrell wasn't even born, not a big deal. I don't care. Last time the Habs were in the Cup final, uh,
Which
what's
was
my
when?
my my sister? She was born already, so she's 30 years old and still longer than the Maple Leafs seeing a Cup final. So keep your keep your talking. I don't care. Whatever. They're kicking off the rest. Playoffs haven't started. Wait, just wait. Canadians in five. But we're not here to talk about hockey, are we? We're here to talk about fantasy football. And when we're talking about fantasy football, we're going division by division. Last week we did the NFC South, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Jacob Murchison. So this week we will be This week we will be doing the AFC South. So those teams
Who could have
include
predicted it? I don't know. Who could have?
those teams include the Indianapolis Colts, the Houston Texans, the Tennessee Titans, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, to kick things off, unless you want to talk about anything more, I'm just here for the Fantasy Fridays today. I'm excited. I'm pumped. I've been doing mock drafts. I can't wait to draft for our fantasy football. Are you ready to go? Are you ready to start this thing rolling?
Just as ready as the Leafs to win the Stanley Cup, so I think that's 100%.
Make it over the first round, then talk to me. To start off, we're going to go with our quarterbacks, but we're going to start off with the Houston Texans. So we're going to go position by position for the Houston Texans. And to start, we're going to go with their quarterback, who is Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson had 3,852 passing yards last year, 26 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 413 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, and 1 reception touchdowns for you guys in the PPR leagues.
Yeah.
So maybe something to look out for. He can do it all. Dior Walker. Oh, if you don't know, watch some Last Chance U football. Pretty good. But Deshaun Watson, seen as one of those quarterbacks who can do it all, just like some others in the league. Um, Obviously, in my opinion, he's a top 5 fantasy football quarterback. I would pick him maybe around 7th or 8th round if you're in a standard PPR league. I have him ranked as the number 4 quarterback this year for fantasy football. Where do you have him?
Yeah, I as well have him as number 4. It's kind of cute. Kind of picked the same number. It's adorable. This will be the first year that Deshaun Watson will not be throwing to DeAndre Hopkins this year, which will be a tragic, tragic loss, and that's to any team. I'm not a fan of Bill O'Brien at all, the coach and or coordinator who calls the plays. He needs to relinquish the play calling duties to an offensive coordinator and focus
Yeah.
on the grand scheme of things rather than just calling offensive plays. Although last year, Deshaun Watson had an average of 9.2 yards per attempt to receivers other than DeAndre Hopkins, and those receivers are going to be mentioned later on. But Deshaun Watson, I think,
Absolutely.
is very good that he's going to be able to get a pass playing. But DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, it's going to help your numbers out. So you might see a decrease in numbers, but it won't be very drastic because Deshaun Watson's a very safe bet for fantasy football quarterback because he is, again, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the National Football League. So he can do it on both ends of the floor, throwing it and running it. So it's a pretty safe bet to have him. So he's a high-end starter for anybody playing fantasy football. Moving now to running
Yeah.
back
When you talk
position.
about quarterbacks, like,
Go ahead.
oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just going to say, when you talk about quarterbacks, in my opinion, when I rank my quarterbacks, the top 5 are all dual threat quarterbacks, where they're not, some of them aren't necessarily known for their running, but they're able to run the ball when need be and pick up the big yards. So I feel like being a quarterback nowadays, you have to be doing more for fantasy. You have to be doing more than
I
just
was gonna
slinging the
say
ball
like
down
you
the
got
field.
like
It's not the
these
tradition.
these veteran fantasy players are kind of used to like your pocket passing quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Got to adapt. They got to adapt. And speaking of
Yep.
adapting, we start off a running back countdown with Houston, and then the person that has to adapt is one David Johnson coming from Arizona in the DeAndre Hopkins trade. In 13 games last year
Yeah.
for Arizona, he had 345 rushing yards, 2 majors, 370 rushing yards, and 4 reception touchdowns. Excuse me. He did obviously lose a starting job to Kenyon Drake halfway through the season, so obviously the numbers don't reflect his true potential. He has been injury riddled over the last 3 seasons, but I think he could
Yeah.
be fantasy's biggest sleeper if he stays healthy because there really is no competition in the Houston room for running the football. So with that all being said, I have him 15th in running back rankings. See him as a mid-end running back number 2 if you're playing a 2 running back league standard. I think he's got a lot of upside. I don't think there's that much risk in taking him. Obviously, injuries are still a very prominent figure. Great story about David Johnson. Like when he was at the peak of his career, I would like to say 3 years ago, like his first season, he got it. Tore his ACL, first
Hmm.
game, done for the season. One Jack Foster, if anyone knows Jack Foster, got it on this trade. There was I think I traded him. I would like to say one of the better receivers back in the day. I can't think of his name, but it was there was a 6-player deal, blockbuster fantasy trade,
Jeez.
and I took David Johnson with my first pick, and traded him to Jack's team, and I think Derek Carr was in it, and that's when he broke out. Derek Carr had a breakout
Yeah.
season, a good receiver and a good back. Traded him. Jay Ajayi was on there when he was good on the Dolphins.
But he
That
was
big year
good.
he
Yeah.
had in Miami, and traded. And then first game, tore his ACL's done for the year. Now, I don't think I gave him an hour after that news was leaked. Man, we gotta veto the trade. You gotta give me those guys back. Like, sorry, bud.
Yeah, I agree. David Johnson will be a good player. I see him as being that bench running back or like that flex running back. Also, before I mention where I have him in my top in my rankings, I want to tell you, Jay, right now. I was talking to our commish for our fantasy football league earlier today, and it says right now that we're in a PPR league, right? Which I was happy
Makes me
about.
very
Pretty
happy.
sure you were happy. Yeah, well, he said he's going to change that because he does not want to play in a PPR league, and they haven't been playing in a PPR league for years apparently. Which
Don't you hate Canadians?
I guess those past 2 or 3 years, I wasn't in their leagues. I was in some other leagues. I was in yours last year and the year before. I was
League of
in some other
Idiots.
one.
It's the best
Yeah,
league
but
ever.
so I
White
think
Claw
he's gonna
Stanley
change
Cup
it.
for the winner.
I think he's gonna change it. So we're not gonna be PPR. So that may change your whole scheme of things. It's a running back. They want running back heavy leagues. I don't like it either. It should be
You know that
PPR.
taste like when you throw up in the back of your mouth and then you have to swallow it. That's what I just did right now after I heard it's
I
in
know.
a PPR league.
I'm gonna try to convince them. They might be a bit of
And
some
speaking
buck
of PPR
tease, but
leagues, this guy who shit is a PPR machine, if you ask me. Stay on the Houston Texans. It's Duke Johnson, your former Cleveland Brown, and the University of Miami, go Hurricanes, all-time rushing yards leader. In the last season for the Texans, Duke Johnson put up 83 carries for 410 yards rushing, but had 44 receptions to go for 410 rushing yards and 5 total touchdowns. So as I've already mentioned, he's a PPR machine. He's probably one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. Obviously, doesn't get the bulk of the carries because
yeah,
that's just not his game. He's more of a catch first player. Obviously, probably in the grand scheme of things, it isn't what he wants to do, but he does it really well. So with that all being said, not getting the bulk of the carries, he's 45th in my running back rankings. He's back and flex player, but it's very safe bet because he's going to get some targets regardless. Because I think Deshaun Watson plays that option game really well because he's obviously, like you said, dual threat quarterback. So if he's got a catchable receiver like Duke Johnson, it's a very valuable asset to have. Is your rankings go that high?
my rankings go to 42, and then I have a few sleepers. But before I'm gonna tell you, I had David Johnson at 18, so you had him at 15, so I had him just around that ballpark. But yeah, so I don't have Duke Johnson in here. He could be a sleeper, but I didn't have it in my
I picked him
top three
last year in my
sleepers.
fantasy. It worked out pretty well.
Oh, you don't know who's going to be a bust or who's going to be a bust. So he's going to be a bust. But as we move along now to the wide receivers, when I look at the wide receiving core in Houston, I have my top 30 here, right? I have them laid out. And I don't have any receivers in the top 30, but I have two that would be in my sleeper picks out of my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sleepers. Two of them reside in Houston on the Texans because honestly, you don't know which guy is going to be that number one guy this year. So I'll name them both right now. One that I really favor over the other, in my opinion, is I favor Will Fuller the fourth. Last year, he had 670 reception yards with 3 reception touchdowns. One, he had that big game last year. I remember where he had over I forget how many.
And
I
guess
think,
who had him on his fantasy team?
of course, he did.
This guy.
But yeah, he just snapped that game. But last year as well, with DeAndre Hopkins being gone, I think Will Fuller he's a deep threat, and he's another guy that people should look out for in PPR leagues or just fantasy leagues in general. And the other guy, who is not bad himself when he's very healthy, is Brandon Cooks, who had 583 reception yards and 2 reception touchdowns. Obviously, both of them playing just like typical football. They didn't have great numbers, huge numbers, but now they both have their time to shine, prove who's going to be that number one person in Houston. So I have Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks as the sleepers outside of my top 30, but sleepers in the draft for sure, and two guys you should highly consider. But I wouldn't take them on your same team. I would pick one or the other.
Yeah, I'm just going to go one first and then the other. Will Fuller, I think, like you said, he should be primed for a breakout fantasy league because obviously DeAndre Hopkins isn't getting the bulk of the targets, so he should get more looks. But I think he has to stay healthy to be efficient. Obviously, this is an Eddie player, but he's got an injury history. He missed 5 games last season due to injury, so it's kind of a concern. Wasn't obviously I picked him in my fantasy league. I didn't have him as a starter, just had him with great matchups, and worked out for me because he had a monster game one day, put up a big 40 spot. But I have him 35th in my wide receiver rankings as a back end wide receiver number 2. But also, I think he could be used very well in the flex position as a middle end player. Again, he's good depth position, and obviously Deshaun Watson has to throw the ball to somebody. So, and as well, Brandon Cooks, he's been on 3 teams in the last 4 years. I think that's very hard to establish yourself in the league if you're getting passed around like a J. So, I mean, it's pretty tough. 4 of the past 5 seasons, he was a top 15 fantasy receiver. So he's proven that he can put up some nice numbers. Again, could be one of fantasy's biggest sleepers because really no one kind of talks about Brandon Cooks and the best receivers talk. But shout out my friend Andre Colomb, big Saints fan. He was pissed that they traded away Brandon Cooks to the Patriots. Should have stuck with the Saints. If you could imagine the Saints receiving core right now, if it was the same, Mike Thomas, Brandon Cooks, Emmanuel Sanders.
That'd be disgusting. Probably the best trio in the league.
And he's only 26 years old. So he's
not an old guy. He's not
no,
like an old,
but
hefty veteran.
Concussions are a major issue. I think he's got 3 concussions in his NFL career. Yeah. So longevity is a concern. And with that all being accounted for, I have him 39th in wide receiver rankings as again, same establishment as Will Fuller, back end wide receiver 2, mid to back end flex position. So take one or the other. Brandon Cooks is more of a slot receiver there than Will Fuller is your deep threat. Yep. So whatever you establish more as receptions rather than yards. If you want receptions, Brandon Cooks. If you want yards, Will Fuller.
Precisely.
We move to tight end position. As a former Cleveland Browns fan, we all just know this name very well. It's Darren Fells. 34 receptions for 341 yards and a monster 7 touchdowns, which was good for 3rd most for a tight end. He had 4 top 10 fantasy weeks to week 8, but did slip the rest of the way. Didn't see outside of top 15 for the rest of the season. So obviously you have production as an issue, as consistency as well. So with that all taken accounted for, he's 34th in my tight end rankings as a low end backup. Obviously there's much better names to go out and get rather than Darren Fells. So if you want him to slide up as a backup, like backup tight ends, but playing a non-PPR, don't take it. PPR, take him. So Darren Fells does not slide up my board too far.
Yeah, I have top 25 tight ends, and he doesn't crack that top 25. There's a lot of better, like we said in the previous podcast, there's a lot of great depth in this tight end position. Unless you're playing in a 20-man league, you'll probably get a pretty decent tight end. In this day of age, there's a lot of great tight ends out there, and I don't think Fells is going to be one of those guys you should keep an eye out for. So yeah, like you said, he's out of the top 25. He's in the top 30 for you. As we move along to kickers now, so the Houston Texans have the young. He has a long name, so we'll keep it short. Kaimi Fairbairn. He has a longer name, but we'll keep it short. But last year, he had 20 out of 25 field goals made. He made 40 of his 45 extra points. Of the field goals that he missed, so he made 3 for 6 from 50 plus, so he missed 3 from 50 plus, which is hard to do, obviously, to make those ones. He was 4 for 6 from 40.
Adorable.
He was 4 for 6 from 40 to 49 yards. Then he was 8 for 8 from 30 to 39 and 5 for 5 for 20 to 29. So he was getting those short to mid-range kicks. He was nailing them. The longer kicks he had a bit more struggle with, but he's still young, so he's able to use his leg. I have him inside my top 10 to look up for as your number 9 kicker. Obviously, kickers shouldn't be taken until like that later round. If you're in a 12-man league, you're going to have like, 15 rounds or something like that. So you shouldn't be taking him maybe until the 12th, 13th round or maybe even later. But still, he's a good kicker to look out for. There's a lot of other good kickers too, but you don't know. Some guys just like to say, oh, I'm going to pick this kicker in the 8th round because I can. There's just some guys out there. You don't know. You might be in a league full of idiots like we were last year, or
That's the league name.
or the league maybe this year. I see a few people
Scrubs.
just not using their heads. So just look out. Make sure you want to be good at every single position if you're really in it to win it. But Fairbairn, number 9 kicker for me.
Yeah, his numbers off of Fairbairn. He's 20 of 25 for field goals and 40 of 45 for extra points. He was perfect from inside 40 yards and out, but again, hasn't raised very much fantasy points. Your bulk of your fantasy points coming from 40 plus.
Mm-hmm.
So shaky 2019 season, but he was fantasy's best kicker in terms of points for 2018. So with that proven track record, I have him 12th in my kicker rankings. If he falls to you in the final pick of your draft, snatch him up. Like it's no risk at all if you're going to take him with your final pick and you're not passing up on anybody else if you wait that long to get him. So it's a good bargain.
Mm-hmm.
We move to defense and special teams now for Houston. They had 31 sacks, 12 INTs, 10 fumbles, and 2 majors. So not much eye-popping names off the top of my list for Houston. Obviously, the 2 that jump off is for anybody's list is your perennial defensive player of the year in J.J. Watt and Whitney Merciless up your front 7. J.J. Watt,
Overrated,
like I'm sure Houston fans go out the whole season, start off every season by saying, "Oh, is J.J. Watt going to be healthy?" It's a coin flip. It's a coin
It
flip to see if
is.
he's going to be healthy or not for a full season. But if he is, they're unstoppable. But if he's
His
not,
brother's better, but whatever.
but
TJ's better.
if he's healthy, the defense thrives. If he doesn't, it suffers. So it all depends on what JJ Watt does. And with that being said, I still have him 14th in my defensive rankings. Bench player, bench. If you want to take an extra defense, take him on the bench. But it's not worth the reward to see if JJ Watt plays or not.
Yeah, their defense where you're looking like at the matchups, like you don't draft them, but if you're looking at a matchup 1 week and you like that matchup and your defense is on bye or something, or you don't like the matchup that your defense has, pick them up, drop your kicker or something dumb like that, and pick them up like that. But other than that, it's not something to look out for. Houston defense is nothing special, not like the Steelers defense. So we'll go right along to the Tennessee Titans now. So when we talk about quarterbacks for the Tennessee Titans, you have Ryan Tannehill. You know this offense is not a heavy throw offense. They don't like to pass the ball a lot because we'll get into the running back situation later. But with Ryan Tannehill last year, he had 2,742 passing yards, 22 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 185 rushing yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns, which kind of surprised me, him being able to rush that ball into the end zone. But Ryan Tannehill, he's not a person like a fantasy quarterback to look out for. He's reliant on his running back more often than not. So I have him at number 20 in my rankings out of 35. So I have him at 20 out of 35. Where do you have him?
Yeah, I have him 21st in the quarterback rankings. So the Titans playbook is extremely run heavy.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see a whole lot of gunslinging mentality from Ryan Tannehill. He's also of a fresh new contract extension, so he's going to have to prove his worth. Tennessee, he has a 70% completion percentage and does average 9 yards per attempt. So
The
When
highest in
he's
the
throwing it,
NFL.
it's going long, but it's just not a huge sample size. And
Yeah.
as well, this is going to be his first full season in quite a while because obviously he took over from Marcus Mariota last season. So I value him as a
Like good
low
with the
end quarterback
Dolphins.
number one or a high end backup if you want to carry two quarterbacks.
Yeah, I agree.
So I move to the tailback position. Is now the guy who really stole the show in the 2019-2020 playoffs for Tennessee and practically the league is Derrick Henry, who had a monstrous 1,540 rushing yards and 16 rushing touchdowns, as well as 206 reception yards with 4 reception touchdowns. So he led the NFL in carries with 303 rushing yards with the aforementioned 1,540 and rushing touchdowns with 16. Although he only had 18 receptions, so your dual threat thing you're looking for, as well in quarterbacks when you're rushing and throwing, you see in running backs with catching and rushing. So very high value with receivers who or running backs who can catch. But like we've said, Tennessee has a very run heavy playbook, so it makes Henry an absolute force in fantasy football because he's going to get the ball a lot. So with that all being
Yep.
taken accounted for, he is ranked number 4 in my running back
Ooh.
rankings. A high end running back number 1 should be going pretty quick in non PPR leagues.
Yeah, I have him at number 5, so pretty close as well, top 5. The 4 above him are pretty good dual threat running backs, in my opinion. I would say some of them are, some of them aren't, but that's what you're kind of looking for in most leagues nowadays. People are looking for, can you do more than just what you're asked of doing? Can you do more than that? Derrick Henry, I think he's able to, but he's more just the type of guy who's just going to pound the ball down the field because look how big that guy is. There's no question about it. But yeah, he's been pretty great last year. I think didn't he sign a contract this year,
Yes, he did.
like recently? So he's got something to prove as well. Maybe rush for even more than he did last year, which would be hard to do, but could be possible with the offense that they have. And as we look at the wide receivers for them now, so the one wide receiver I have of the Tennessee Titans in my top 30, and none of them are sleepers. I have AJ Brown. AJ Brown last year had 1,051 reception yards, 8 reception touchdowns, 60 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdown on just 3 rushing attempts. So he's a guy that you look up for. He was a rookie last year, right? So obviously kind of like a breakout season for him in his first year. And who knows, he could be that number 1 guy this year for Ryan Tannehill to look out down the field. If Derrick Henry can't get hot for some random reason, then they have this guy and they have their tight end who we'll get into later as well. But AJ Brown, I think, is someone that a lot of people should keep their eye on. There's a lot of better receivers for sure, but AJ Brown is still, if you're a number 1 guy on a team, you're going to get a lot of looks. You're going to get a lot of receptions. So that raises a lot of eyebrows for PPR leagues. So I have at number 17 overall in my wide receiver rankings.
Yeah, I mean, before coming into this season, AJ Brown was kind of looked at as DK Metcalf's teammate at Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of came into his own. But as well, 1,000-yard season, you can't really ignore that. He had 5 top 10 fantasy games last season. He only trailed the best receiver in football right now, Mike Thomas, for top 10 games. So point production is there. He had
Yep.
12.5 yards per target and 9 yards after catch. So that's kind of hard to ignore, but it was inconsistent during his rookie year because he only
Yeah.
really picked up his production after the week 11 bye week. So up until then, he was kind of silent. But after the bye week, he really picked it up. So hopefully he can keep that momentum going. So I have him 17th with my receiver rankings. He's as a front to mid end wide receiver number 2.
So
So
same spot.
obviously you're not looking to have him as your number 1 receiver. You shouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
looking to take him as your number 1 receiver. But he's gonna be a very good compliment to whoever you take, for sure. Move to tight end now is kind of taking over the reins for Delaney Walker in Tennessee. It's Jonnu Smith,
Yeah.
who
Oof.
had 35 receptions for 439 yards and 3 touchdowns. So there's no competition, obviously, now with the Tennessee room for tight end, with Delaney Walker now out of the picture. Smith was second in the position in catch rate at 81%, yards per target at 10.2, and yards after catch was 7.9. So he could be primed for a major season this year. But he only has 8 career touchdowns and 6 career end zone targets. And he's been in the league for 4 years. So Obviously, when you're looking for fantasy points, you want the 6 for a touchdown. So if he only has 8 to his name, it's a very, very big question mark. So with that being said, he is 21st in my tight end rankings as a middle to back end backup player. Maybe Tannehill can find some luck with Jonnu Smith, but I don't want to take the risk on it, and I'm sure a lot of people don't either because you want to take a name that you know rather than Jonnu Smith. So maybe give him another year to establish himself in the league, and then maybe he'll run out our boards a little quicker next year.
Yeah, I agree. I went right at number 20. So same thing like you said, he's taken over Delaney Walker. So who knows? He could have a completely breakout season, but there's a lot of other tight ends who will be better, I think, in my opinion, and you don't have to really take that gamble on. So yeah, Jonnu Smith at number 20, and then we move along to AFC Titans. I don't have their kicker. When I talk about kickers, I don't
Because we
have them.
stand clear of Titans kickers. That's why.
Yeah,
Stay clear.
I don't have
Because right
him
now, the
in my
kicker
top 15.
that would be for the Tennessee Titans, if anybody, again, Cleveland Browns fans know his name very well, it happens to be Greg the Leg Joseph. From
Oh,
the
Greg
pride of
Joseph.
South Africa, Greg
Mm-hmm.
Joseph. And
Scared me
he
there.
screams inconsistency. He screams not a very strong leg. He screams missed field goals. He screams missed extra points. He screams maybe a lost game, maybe. What?
At
What?
Bears fans. At Bears fans.
That's Cody Parkey. Calm down.
I know. I'm just talking about Bears fans missed field goals just to trigger them all. Yeah, but I don't have any of them in my top 15. So I think
As
we'll
well, you
skip the
shouldn't.
kickers. I think we'll skip the kickers. Do you have anything to talk about for their defense for the Tennessee Titans?
Do I? They had 43 sacks, 14 INTs, which was good for 8th in football, 9 fumbles, 4 defensive touchdowns, which was good for 4th again in football, 331 points against, 5,752 yards against. But they did lose some very key pieces in one Jarrell Casey and other Logan Ryan. Jarrell Casey, as we know, we mentioned it on the podcast, was kind of a very messy, messy goodbye. Kind of what you script up in soap operas, if you ask me. It's very, very touching. Very touching.
Okay.
But I do have some notable linebackers, Rashad Evans being one of them, and a very good secondary. Kevin Byard, highest paid safety in football, and Dory Jackson, this absolute speedster, who could be a very good special teams player possibly, but they really don't have a established pass rush in my mind. I don't. Because obviously Jarrell Casey was their pass rush last year, and he's gone, so they really
Yeah.
don't have anyone to fill that void. So I think the sack production can go way down, even low as it already is at 43. So with that being said, they don't crack my top 15 in defense. How about you?
Yeah, they don't crack my top 16 that I have. So yeah, we won't talk about them. They're just another defense you shouldn't really keep an eye out for. Maybe if you go in auto draft and you pick them, you get unlucky. But we're gonna go to the Indianapolis Colts now. And we talk about the Colts. You have the new quarterback in there for the Colts, in veteran Philip Rivers. So Philip Rivers last year with the Chargers had 4,615 pass yards, 23 touchdowns, but also 20 interceptions. So this guy's a gunslinger, but kind of gives me some Jameis Winston vibes with throwing those interceptions, which nobody likes to see. But he's on a new team now, and he may want to prove himself. He has some different weapons to use. He's going to try to create some team chemistry with some of his receivers on his team and the running backs on his team, some new young running backs as well. But for Philip Rivers, he's not really a dual threat quarterback.
Yeah,
Not
you
at
think?
all. Not at all. For me, I have him at number 24 out of 35 in my QB rankings.
Yeah, just for more stats up on the man with the legend. Should be a Hall of Famer, Philip Rivers. He did have a 68% completion percentage and 7.8 yards per attempt. So when you factor in that he threw 20 picks and had a 68% completion percentage,
He's
most of those
throwing the ball.
incompletions were picks.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's not missing his no. Apparently, he's missing his receivers. It's going to the other team's hands. So
Yeah.
it does, although his supporting cast in Indianapolis right now, I think is a step down from what he had with the Chargers. Obviously, you had Melvin Gordon, you had Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry,
Austin Eckler.
very star-studded affair, obviously. But he does have a better line in Indianapolis than he did in LA.
Quentin
But with that all being
Nelson.
said, I had him as 23rd in my quarterback rankings as a backup player. I think it needs to sharpen down those INTs because
Yep.
it's not a very good number to look at right now. But Frank Reich is a very likes to pass the ball, so maybe he can Philip Rivers can show him some love after playing 16 years with a different team. So running back position, they kind of have shake this up. Indianapolis one of the most deepest teams, I think, in the running back position. And number one, I have with one Jonathan Taylor. Rookie season coming out of the University of Wisconsin. Go Badgers. He had 2,003 rushing yards, 21 touchdowns, and 252 reception yards, and 5 reception touchdowns. He's probably the most NFL-ready player in the draft in the running back position after being over 225 steaming big pounds. But he does have 18 career fumbles.
Yeah, which is worrisome.
And that's in college, where you're playing
Mm-hmm.
boys. And then you're going to the NFL, where you're playing men.
Big boy men.
So very wishy-washy if you want to see how that goes. So I have him as my 25th overall running back. I see him as a mid-end running back number 2, maybe a mid-end flex, depending on how you play your leagues, PPR, non-PPR. I might want to stay away from Jonathan Taylor just because I love him so much as a player. So it's got to drain back the personality because I love him so much and not pick him with my heart instead of my brain. So.
Yeah, I have him at number 23, so we're right around the same part. We have 25, but the other running back on Indianapolis, which maybe I would kind of take a gamble on. I wouldn't draft him maybe, but look out for in the waiver wire. If Jonathan Taylor doesn't live up to what he's expected of, is Marlon Mack, who last year had 1,091 rushing yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. And let's say Jonathan Taylor isn't able to live up to what he's expected of, Marlon Mack's going to come in and try to get that job done to prove that he deserves to be the number one person running back on that team. So I think he's someone that you shouldn't be looking out to draft for, but someone to look out on the waiver wire in case Jonathan Taylor, let's say, gets injured or isn't playing up to his abilities. So
Yeah,
Marlon Mack's a sleeper running back for me.
Yeah, Marlon Mack was top 10 in the NFL in carries, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns last year. So he can produce when he's on the field. I had him obviously in my fantasy league perform very nicely for myself, but there is a lot of competition right now to be in the Indianapolis room in the running back position. So I don't know if you want to take a gamble on Marlon Mack as a draft pick, but like you said, waiver wire is a very solid fallback plan for anybody who's trying to pick up a running back and sees a favorable matchup or some injuries fall into place. But Marlon Mack, I have 44th in my running back rankings as a back-end backup, pardon the pun. But as well, he's not really listed as myself for a running back, but he technically is. It's Naheem Hines, who plays a very quick game. He had 2 punt return touchdowns last year, and there were only 7.
Damn.
So we'll get into defense, special teams, but he's labeled as a running back, but he does return kicks.
So yeah, they're pretty good. Have some depth there at the running back position in Indianapolis. But we move along to the wide receivers now, and one of the wide receivers who I think is kind of slept on, but he's also had a few injuries that have set him back a little bit, is T.Y. Hilton. And last year he only played 10 games. He had 501 reception yards with 5 touchdowns. Didn't have a spectacular season. But that being said, I have him ranked right behind A.J. Brown at number 18 overall in my fantasy rankings. He's still someone to look up for. Maybe he gets that chemistry going with Philip Rivers, and he produces if he stays healthy. So, there's a lot of other receivers. He should be taken around maybe like a flex wide receiver, bench wide receiver, in my opinion, more towards the flex wide receiver. But I feel like you could get some better wide receivers at wide receiver number 2, but T.Y. Hilton number 18 in my fantasy rankings.
Yeah, like you said, he only played in 10 games last season, but I'm sure those 10 games were not played at 100%. He was dealing with that ankle injury all season long, and if you're a wide receiver with an ankle injury, you're not 100% the whole season as well. I think you failed to break down that Andrew Luck retired in August last year, who happens to be the quarterback in Indianapolis. So I don't know if you can picture yourself as a wide receiver that your quarterback retires with less than a month before the season starts, and you have to get chemistry with a brand new quarterback that doesn't know the system very well in Jacoby Brissett. I think it was really tough to
Yeah.
adjust.
Who got injured as well?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
T.Y. Hilton was 13th in fantasy points prior to his Week 9 injury. So I think he's primed to have another good season. And before this
Yeah.
injury-riddled season last year, he's only missed 2 games in his whole career before the season started, or last season started, excuse me. So I think T.Y. Hilton's primed to have a really good bounce-back season. So I have him 21st in my wide receiver rankings, which is I have him as a front to mid-end wide receiver number 2. I'm going to snatch him up if he's available because I think he's just have a breakout season. Frank Reich, pass-heavy offense. Phillip Rivers throws the ball a lot. So I think T.Y. Hilton's going to have a lot of numbers. Pro Bowl.
Agreed.
Pro Bowler, T.Y. Hilton this season.
Heard it here first. So who do you have at the tight end then?
Oh, that's it for your receivers?
Yeah, that's it.
That's it?
I'm not. I'm not talking about any more receivers. I have a few. I don't want to get into.
Well, if you want to talk about sleepers, let's talk about this guy as your second-year wide receiver out of the Ohio State University, and that is one Paris Campbell. Had an injury-riddled rookie season, obviously. He only did not play very many games. I only had 18 receptions for 127 yards with 1 touchdown, so that's a good receiver. That's like the breakout receiving game for anybody. But I think it could be a major sleeper due to his unreal speed. Bring it back to his 40-yard dash, ran a 4.31. So I think get some games out there. He could be a solid receiver. Complement T.Y. Hilton's game. So I have him 49th out of my 50 wide receiver rankings as a bench player role, waiver wire. Could be a very solid pickup down the road. But like you said, we're going to tight end now. And a guy that's been doing it for a very long time and doing it well, it's Jack Doyle, who had 43 receptions for 448 yards and 4 majors this last season. No Eric Ebron for Indianapolis this season, so Doyle's going to get the bulk of the workload. And, Phillip Rivers loves his tight ends. That one guy named Antonio Gates, surefire Hall of Famer. Hunter Henry played really well for LA when Phillip Rivers was there. So I think there's major upside to see Jack Doyle primed to have another big season. So with that all being said, I have him 16th in my tight end rankings as a back-end tight end number 1 or a high-end backup. I think a lot of people are going to sleep on Jack Doyle this season. So if he's there, back end of the rounds, snatch him up because he's going to have some big numbers.
I think there's another tight end I don't even want to talk about to some people who I want to snatch up. People don't even talk about him. But on my 16, I had Eric Ebron, the former Indianapolis Colts, but now Pittsburgh Steelers. But I had Jack Doyle at number 17, so just like right behind Eric Ebron.
Because you're a Steelers fan, it's kind of a soft pick.
Well, he's right around the same area, but Jack Doyle, like I said, he's out for a breakout season, in my opinion, as well. Phillip Rivers, looking at him the whole time, maybe. But like you said, before with Paris Campbell and T.Y. Hilton, they're also looking for breakout seasons. So who knows? Maybe all of them could have a great season together, mesh well together, trying to prove something. Jack Doyle, definitely a tight end to look out for.
I don't think T.Y. Hilton needs to prove anyone to anybody.
Oh, maybe just
he's an all-pro receiver.
Yeah, but he wants to prove to himself that he can have
He's a Pro Bowler this year. You already here first. He's a Pro Bowl receiver.
I'm not getting any disrespect to T.Y. Hilton. I love T.Y. Hilton, so don't come at me.
He's going to come on the podcast. He's going to rip you up.
Yeah, he's going to call the podcast because he's one of the 10 viewers on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Who's your kicker? Oh, I'm doing kickers. I don't have a kicker.
You don't?
No, not for the Colts,
wow.
I'm pretty sure.
Well, he doesn't
top 15,
top 15. He does not.
Yeah.
But just for Indianapolis Colts fans, because there's a lot of them out there. It's Chase McLaughlin. He went 18 for 23 on field goals, but was perfect for extra points through 26 straight. He was perfect from 50 yards out, but only made half of his kicks from 40 to 49 yards, which is where the bulk of your kicks come from. So it's too shaky for me to take him with my kicker pick. So that's why he's not cracking my top 15. Maybe he can surprise some people. He was ranked very high among ESPN's fantasy rankings, but that's why they're ESPN. For defense, special teams, we already mentioned Nyheim Hines having 2 punt return touchdowns out of the 7 in total last season. But the defense had 41 sacks, 15 INTs, 8 fumbles, 3 scores, 355 points against, and 5,549 yards against. They did add defensive tackle DeForest Buckner, which is a major upgrade to force some more pass rush in Indianapolis. And they really didn't lose anybody in the offseason. They still have Darius Leonard, Kenny Moore, Justin Houston, and Malik Hooker, who are your primary players on that defensive side of the ball. So with that all being said, with all these big name players on your team now, I have them 8th in my defensive rankings as a mid to low end starter. I like them a lot. Like, again, this division's not one of the stronger in terms of offense. Like, you have to play Jacksonville twice. That's going to be great. And Tennessee, I don't know if it's going to score a lot of points against Tennessee. So I think they have a very big year. So I have them 8th. What about yourself?
Well, another name I'd like to mention is Xavier Rhodes. They picked up as well. So obviously he hasn't been playing great he played great with Minnesota and everything, but he's on this team now, so he's going to play good. And some stats are DeForest Buckner coming in this season. Last year, he had 62 tackles, 7.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 4 fumble recoveries. So that's a big, big name to bring in and a good quality player to bring in as well. So like you said, you have them at 8th. I have them at number 9, so still cracking the top 10.
I'm taking them if it's there. I'm taking them if it's there.
If they're there, you kind of have to pick them up. But you don't know. But you don't know. The thing is, you don't know when they're going to get picked up because, like we said before, there's going to be some buckets in your league who might pick them up in like the 10th round. So we're not even going to talk about those buckets, and we're just going to move along to the final team now.
Sorry.
Yeah, I would take them like that. The final team in the AFC South is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when we talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, we have the quarterback position. We have rookie sensation Gardner Minshew, who last year had 3,271 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 344 rush yards. I don't know if he's going to have that great of a season as he did last year. A lot of people are saying that he's going to hit that sophomore slump like Baker Mayfield did. And yeah, of course, I'm going to mention it every podcast. Shake your head. Yes. Yes, sir. But Gardner Minshew, I'm outside my 25 at number 26 out of 35 in the quarterback rankings. How about yourself?
Yeah, I have him 25th in my quarterback rankings. I think efficiency for myself was an issue with Gardner Minshew. He only has a 61% completion percentage and a measly 7 yards per attempt. But you know who the new offensive coordinator is in Jacksonville?
Who's that?
It's Jay Gruden, your former Washington head coach.
Washington
kind of make
team.
Kirk Cousins who Kirk Cousins is right now, so he can maybe groom Gardner Minshew. So he does bring also a pass-heavy playbook. So sorry, running back. So we'll get to in a second. But I think he could work with Gardner Minshew. Like, he's a very major upside. He kind of made Jacksonville kind of watchable last season because they really weren't.
Yeah.
But I think Jay Gruden can work with him. I don't think he's gonna have a sophomore slump like Baker did. So I think he might have. But not worth the gamble.
You don't want to take the gamble, exactly.
He's not worth the gamble. 25th, low-end quarterback number 1, or a high-end backup if you want to carry 2 quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Running back, we have the pride of LSU, Go Tigers, Leonard Fournette, who had 1,152 rushing yards, but only 3 rushing scores, but did have 522 rushing yards. So obviously the glaring number that we just wrote down is 3 rushing touchdowns. So obviously touchdown production has to increase. But he did play 88% of snaps. He handled 87% of the carries and 1/5 of all receiving targets as a running back.
Mm-hmm. That's
your
kind of
cool threat is there. He's your true
workhorse
guy.
He's the only guy on the team. Like the team's falling apart.
And he is in a contract year, so he's gonna have to play to get some serious cash shoulder.
That's for sure.
So with that on the back of his shoulder, I have him 10th in my running back rankings as a back end running back number 1, high end running back number 2.
Yeah, I still have him top 10. I have him number 9. Still Leonard Fournette, if he's there and you're in that 12-man league, pick him up for sure, 100%. He's, in my opinion, it's not a gamble to pick up Leonard Fournette. He's a running back who's been pretty good. Like we said for. He's at 1,100 plus rushing yards last season alone. Obviously, he didn't get that touchdown production, but I feel like he'll get the opportunity to do more this season. Jacksonville obviously hasn't been a great team for a very long time.
Ever.
Probably ever. Got set it right on the dot. But yeah, Leonard Fournette, not a gamble at all. So if he's there, pick him up. If we go to wide receivers now, a wide receiver that really kind of raised a few eyebrows as well is DJ Chark. DJ Chark last season had 1,008 reception yards with 8 reception touchdowns, with Gardner Minshew throwing him that ball. I had him on my team, and he was pretty decent as a flex.
You really showed up last season, eh?
As a flex position. But overall, I'm just at the 25 position out of 30. He's another wide receiver, in my opinion, who would be a good flex receiver. Not really looking at maybe like a lower end tier 2 receiver, but more of a flex wide receiver. If you wanted to pick him up, where do you have him?
Yeah, I have him 24th in my receiver rankings because I think like who else are they going to throw the ball to in Jacksonville, right? Like I think it's going to have to be DJ Chark to get everything.
Yeah,
because he did have 78 receptions last year. It was very high for receivers. And as well, he was a huge red zone threat last year. He had 12 end zone targets. So he kind of worked as your tight end, kind of, sort of, in a very freaky and deaky way. So if he gets the 12 end zone targets and he maybe gets half of those, that's an easy 6 touchdowns. Easily. So, but he's a mid to back end wide receiver number 2. And like you said, a high to mid end flex position player. So I think, again, since he plays for Jacksonville, I think he's going to slide.
Yeah.
Like for true football official. Well, maybe not for the idiots.
You're listening from Unfinished Business. We're telling you. You saw a guy not to really – don't slide on him. If he's there, honestly, I would pick him up. If he's there, he's available because he's going to be that guy in Jacksonville. Like there are some other teams who have just one receiver to look out for. So
like that is A.J. Brown.
Yeah, exactly. And like we'll get to the Miami Dolphins later in the future podcast. I want to talk about them. But yeah.
But one guy I'm really looking forward to seeing this season at the tight end position for Jacksonville, it's Tyler Eifert, who had 43 receptions for 436 yards and 3 touchdowns. This was his first full season in his 8-year career. Obviously, he has been injury riddled. If you find injury riddled in the dictionary, you might see a picture of Tyler Eifert in the Bengals jersey.
Yeah,
his
Bengals, man.
All those back injuries and foot injuries and just missed seasons so hopefully he can regain the prowess he had as a first-round pick. So hopefully he can regain that confidence he had. He did compete for snaps in Cincinnati with C.J. Uzomah, who we'll get to in a future podcast, like you've said. So production could increase in South Florida and Jacksonville. So hopefully he can remain healthy. He's missed 52 of a possible 80 games in his career. So hopefully he can stay healthy. Not worth a gamble because it's Jacksonville. So I have him 29th in my tight end rankings as a mid to back end backup. What about yourself, sir?
Only have 25, so he slides over the top 25 for me, which makes sense. There's better tight ends, like we said before. And realistically, in my fantasy league, when I pick some fantasy leagues, I don't really try to carry 2 tight ends. I try to carry just one tight end and have more running back receivers as options because you don't know who's going to get hurt. And this year, if you want to do your draft right now, like if you're begging for, is you don't know who's going to opt out of this season because of COVID-19. So be patient with your draft. Stop harassing your commish to draft now. Wait a few weeks.
So before you said that, I think it was about a week ago. I'm like, there might be players that opt out. Everybody, oh no, they got it. They want to get paid. No, they're not going to opt out. Are you kidding? And now we're seeing the players opt out. That's why we're on this podcast, because we know, and they don't.
We know. Damian Williams, Dante Hightower, Patrick Chung. You have these guys.
Big names.
Tardif, obviously, you don't like Tardif's not a guy you would look out for in fantasy. But still, they're still big-name football players, and they're opting out because they're using their brains, and they're saying, I want to protect my family. Damian Williams, I'm pretty sure he wants to opt out because his family his wife had 3 miscarriages, and they finally have a baby now, and he wants to make sure they can do everything to protect their child and protect his family.
Shooting blanks, eh?
Oh, okay, come on, have some respect here. That's a low blow. But but yeah, no, there's gonna be a few more players who opt out. We don't know who. But yeah, like you said, don't rush your draft. Wait it out. Wait till the
Oh, low
deadline.
blow, I get it.
Oh my
Good one. Good one.
goodness. 5 years later with this guy. 5 years later. We're gonna move along to kickers here for
We
Jacksonville,
could keep it together.
and their kicker is Mr. Josh Lambo. And Josh Lambo last year had a career high 97.1 percentage
Oh man.
field goals made with 33 out of 34 field goals made. He made 19 out of his 20 extra points. So from 50 plus, he was 4 from 4. He missed one of his 9 from 40 to 49. Then he was 9 for 9 from 30 to 39, and 12 out of 12 for 20 to 29. That's a season that you really like to see from Josh Lambo. That's his best season so far in his
And he's
career.
got one. He has one of the dirtiest celebrations for kickers.
Yeah, he's not that bad. I have him just right behind Cammy Fairbairn at number 10. He could maybe
Isn't that adorable?
he could be maybe a bit higher, but I see him in the top 10 for sure, and he's the top 10 kicker that you should look out for if you wanted to pick him up in your league. Where do you have him?
Yeah, right there at 10. That's why I thought it was adorable.
Oh, that's
But
adorable.
I think if you can classify sleepers with kickers, he is a huge sleeper for kickers.
Sleeper.
Like I went to go surf the web and see fantasy lists, and Josh Lambo is nowhere near anybody's top 15. I
What?
understand. It makes no sense to me. It really doesn't. Because Josh Lambo is what they call shmoney. Doesn't miss. He does not miss.
I
So
don't miss.
maybe the idiots who don't listen to us, who don't, and they follow the draft board that people give them, like NFL Network and ESPN, they're going to see Josh Lambo, and he's going to be way low. Like, oh, I'm not
I'll
going to
take
take
him.
this guy. I'm not
I'll
going to
take
take
him.
him.
I'll
We'll
take him.
take him. Pick him
Thanks for
up.
coming.
Pick him up.
Thanks
Too
for
easy.
coming.
Too easy. But sadly, we're down to the last stat. And position-wise, it's the defense for Jacksonville, who gave up 395 points, 6,007 yards, 22 pass touchdowns, 23 rushing touchdowns, but they did have 47 sacks, 10 INTs, 14 forced fumbles, 9 fumble recoveries. And I think you can chalk up a lot of those fumbles and sacks to one Calais Campbell, who happens to be on Baltimore.
Where did he go? Oh, he's gone. That's right.
And as well, who else did they lose? That's right. The best corner in football, arguably Jalen Ramsey as well.
Not the best, but sure, he likes to think so, Mr. Cocky Jalen Ramsey. Yeah, they lost
Those
both
are
of them.
two huge all-pro players gone. Jacksonville couldn't lock them up because they're Jacksonville. They're still laughing stock of the league.
Yeah, other than the Chargers, yeah, they're the laughing stock of the league.
So
They don't
they
even
do not
crack
my top 15.
Me neither. Good night,
Don't waste your
Jimmer.
breath on them.
Don't even
Do not
think
waste
about
your
them.
breath.
Don't even think about taking them.
Well, this time has just flown by because we are now done the South Division for both the AFC and NFC divisions. We're going to be back next Friday to bring you another division league. Maybe give us a shout out to see what division you want next.
Yeah, let us know in the comments if you're actually watching at this point, which division you want to hear. We'll take AFC or NFC. We don't really care. We're on no schedule. We just want to get this done. We want to provide you with our intel, our information to let you guys.
You should be paying us, but we're just too kind.
Yeah, if you guys win your fantasy leagues and you're listening and you made the right
Give us
choices,
a shout out. Give us a shout
give
out.
us a shout out, and also give us your money because we really earn that money. Give us a little
you
bit
want that merch? Give us
commission.
some money. If you want that merch, we're waiting for it.
We're waiting.
But we're going to be back tomorrow for the weekly recap. What sports is back, baby. Everything's rolling. You got baseball. You got the NBA. You got NHL. And NFL training camps have just opened. So what else do you need than the two guys talking to you right now? What else do you want?
Baseball for now, by the way.
Stay tuned till Saturday with Malcolm's huge pipe bomb. It's Jay Merch.
And Money Malcolm.
This episode of Unfinished Business is presented by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's free.
There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more.
You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership.
And it is everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.